Hey guys, welcome to Office Hours with Bob Ross, episode number 36. I hope everybody out there is doing great, that you are having a great month of August. We're about ready to hit into September. There's a lot of changes going on, at least for me personally, getting into a new position as an educator at a high school. I'll save that for a future podcast, but just know that I'm very excited for the opportunity that I have being able to teach, oddly enough to me, because this wasn't at my high school, but having the opportunity to teach a beginning guitar class, intermediate and advanced guitar class, music appreciation, jazz band, and rock band. It's been a great opportunity to be able to have this as a new challenge, a new journey in this musical journey of mine. And it's really forced me to, I don't even know what to say, just completely change up my mindset a bit and become even more focused, and also to adjust, of course, to our current circumstances. And for future reference, I'm recording this on August 23rd, 2020, coronavirus era, and man, the preparations of just that and preparing for any sort of circumstance of if everything has to go completely online, mix that with being in a new teaching position. There's just a lot going on, but I'll save that for later. I don't want to bore you guys too much with the details of all that at this point, although I don't find it boring at all. It's very exciting. But regardless, let's get on to something that I've been thinking about recently, and probably for a good many years. And that has to do with the way we listen to music and the differences, the things that stand out to me that I miss about listening to music going back 20 years ago compared to what's happening now. And you guys know, it's definitely different. If you're someone who's younger listening to the podcast, and maybe you weren't a teenager 20 years ago or so, then maybe you won't quite relate to what I'm going to say. But I mean, things are so much different now than what they used to be, and I know every generation says the same. But what I miss about the whole experience of listening to music compared to now is that it's overwhelming. I remember looking forward to hearing about a new CD coming out. Maybe Joe Satriani had a new CD, Steve Vai. I wasn't listening to jazz at the time, so couldn't tell you what was coming out at the time. Now I can, because we can all look it up, Google it, right? But at the time, I had no idea about the jazz scene because I wasn't into it. But as far as the heavy metal scene, rock, instrumental rock, I would hear, well, not so much hear, I guess, read about it in Guitar World, Guitar One magazines, reading about these albums that were going to come out by Satriani, Steve Vai. Those were the ones I was really watching at the time. I was hoping Metallica was coming out with a new album on a regular basis, but that didn't happen. Black Label Society. I would see these ads in the magazines, and I remember looking forward to it. And then once it came out, I had to drive about an hour away to get to the closest FYE, if you know what that is. For some of you, you may not know what that is, seeing how I think they're all shut down now. I could be wrong. But basically, it was a retail store where you could get your fix of music. And of course, they had shirts, movies, and everything else you could buy too. But I remember hearing about the album coming out, and then hitching a ride to get to an FYE with my buddy, or if I had to resort to it, have my mom drive me over, depending on what age we're talking about here. If I was talking about the age where I was too young to drive, and then, of course, I didn't drive over. But I remember looking forward to it. And then going over to an FYE, which living in a very small town area that I did, sometimes FYE didn't have it. And then you'd have to order it out and maybe wait 2 weeks for it. But I remember looking forward to being able to acquire that physical CD, get it in my hand, and then on the ride home, again, depending on the vehicle I was in, because a lot of times we had cassette players still in the cars. But looking at that album, opening it up, going through the booklet that came with it, seeing, if I was lucky, maybe you see some pictures of like behind the scenes footage at the studio, them recording. A lot of the instrumental music, of course you don't have any lyrics, so you couldn't read that. But if I bought something that had, music with lyrics, then I'd read through the lyrics, try to imagine what it would sound like. Get that home, put it on the CD player, and listen to it nonstop. So you're talking about one CD, and you're listening to it for more than a few seconds, or maybe just that one-time listen. You go through the album, and then you repeat it. You find a song or two maybe that you like more than any other, and you keep looping those. You hit the repeat one option on the CD player. Then you just keep listening to it over and over again. And you got to the point where you knew the music really, really well, where if you walked away from it, the song was still in your head. And you could hear what all the guitar parts were doing, the drums, the bass. You knew the lyrics. You got to know that song really well. Not because it was on the radio and you were hearing it nonstop, repeated over and over and over because they were pushing it in your face, but it's because it's something that you wanted to listen to and you enjoyed it so much that you tried to understand it so well. It was almost like you're studying the song. And that's missing. I find that for me now, it's definitely missing. I'm caught up with, I think, what the majority of us are caught up in doing. You have access to Amazon Music Service or iTunes, Spotify, whatever other ones happen to be out there. You're locked into a streaming service. You can find anything you want, listen to a little snippet of it, and be like, oh, well, I'm bored with this. I'm going to find something else now. There's no attachment to it. Yes, you're paying for the music service itself to stream the songs and to be able to listen, but you didn't buy that album. So you have no attachment. So what you end up doing is just randomly going with the flow. Maybe you're sitting there listening to a song. Maybe something new that you wanted to check out. You're like, oh yeah, this reminds me of that one song. So then you pull up some songs from your past that you listened to like 20 years ago. You listen back, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember listening to this song. And then you have those memories attached to it. So then you pull up another song from your past. And then it starts popping up these things. Groups that you may also like. Albums that we recommend for you. And then you start going through that list. And then you find something else and something else. And then you skip ahead. And by the time the day's over, whatever music listening you've done that day, you don't remember what you listened to. You remember the songs that you remember from your past because you listened to them so much and you were so caught up in them and you listened to them so much. Once again, like I said, it's like you were studying the songs. Maybe that wasn't your intent. That's kind of like what happened. But then you go through. The next day, you do the same thing. And then maybe you'll just put it on some kind of a random thing where it's based on your listening. We'll generate a song list for you. And then, of course, you can go on YouTube and you can pull from any of the album songs, anything that's been uploaded on there, and you go through that. There's no attachment. And I'm sure the previous generations have said, well, you know, when CDs came out, it's not like it was with records. And when you had portable CD players, then you didn't really take the time to just sit there in a room with someone and listen to the records. I understand. It continues to change. In this instant gratification society that we all get caught up in, our ability to focus on the music, to listen to it intently, to get to know it, has diminished so much. I think that's why pop songs become so popular. And pop songs today, at least to my ears, are different than pop songs in the past. I don't mind listening to pop tunes from the 80s, 70s, 60s. Pop tunes in the 90s are all right. I've had so many students come in with wanting to learn pop tunes of today, songs on the radio. It is incredibly simplified. And maybe because of this instant gratification that we're all so locked up in, maybe that's why. You got to capture people's attention now. If some of these groups that myself and maybe many of you have grown up listening to, where you take a song that lasts 8 minutes, if it were to come out today, how well would it do? I don't know. You know, those songs, they built up over time. There was a story, and that's very much similar to jazz improvisation, listening to jazz music. When you listen to someone that's a great soloist, what do? They tell a story. That's the way guitar solos would be in the past, too. You're telling a story within the song. The song itself is, maybe you could look at the song itself as being the short story. The album is like a collection of short stories. Each song is a short story. Within those short stories, that song, you're developing. You don't just give one little snippet that loops for 3 minutes. The same structure, the same phrasing, the same words over and over. The thing about the music in the past that stands out to me, and something that's missing, and I relate it more so to jazz now, because I mean, you really got to be able to be okay with sitting there and listening to the songs and how they develop. You got to be okay with that. You got to be okay listening to a soloist develop the story. That's missing. You know, and I would like for that to come back. How do we get it back? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But the fact that these songs develop in such a way, you were attached to the physical copy of a CD, a record, a cassette tape, 8-track, whatever you want. The mini disc players, you remember those? I came so close to getting one of those. But what you had was a physical representation of something that you could carry with you, that you could open up, that you could look at. The sound, the feel, the smell. When you're streaming music, that's gone. That's something that I think's missing. We don't have the attachment to it anymore. That's why it's so easy just to scan through everything. You remember that option? I think the radio still allows you to do that in the cars now, right? You just hit that scan button, hold down the button, it'll start scanning through all the stations and let you hear little snippets of them. Maybe at some point it'll come back. I don't know. It's a lot easier, and I'll give it that. It's a lot easier to have a streaming device where I can pull or streaming service on our phones where we can pull this up and listen to something right now. And it's a beneficial thing when I want to have students listen to something, and I don't have to say, well, let's wait until I can actually get the CD in so we can take a listen to it. It makes things a lot easier. I'll give it that. But if you're going to go through with the streaming services and you're taking this option, then maybe consider spending a little bit more time with a certain artist and or album. Give it a chance. Like, really listen to it. More than a minute. More than a day. Try a week. How about 2 weeks? How about a month? Really get into the songs. If you really like it, really get into it. Anyways, guys, that's all I got for today. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. That way you can keep up with new episodes coming out. Make sure you rate it. Leave a comment. I'd be happy to discuss anything dealing with music and guitar and or other instruments if I can help out. Topics about jazz. I'll talk about other music styles too if you like. Don't forget that I have lessons and courses available on musiclessons.com/Bob Ross. Check those out. I'll talk about some interesting things on there, dealing with how I see the fretboard, about intervallic chords. That's a good one. That'll stretch your fingers out a little bit. I deal with other things too that, dive into the realm of maybe some odd meter things and tune analysis. So check that out. Thanks for listening, and I hope you can join me next time on Office Hours with Bob Ross.